guys, this is Mike, your host of Craft Beer Storm and the founder, brewer, owner, chief cook and bottle washer at Beara Brewing Company in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Today we have Chet Brett. He's the brand manager at Tribes Beer Company in Illinois, in Mokina, Illinois, and they have a couple locations out there. And he's very interesting. He has a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience in the industry. His grandfather worked for Schaefer Beer. I don't know if you guys remember Schaefer Beer, but they were the official beer of the New York Mets, the most awesome team in the major leagues, because I'm a Met fan. But yeah, and so we're going to get to it now. But before we do that, if you haven't had a chance, please go on to iTunes. If you like what we're doing, you like our podcasts, like content, the people we're having on, go on to iTunes and subscribe for me. Leave me a rating and a review. That just helps our podcast to just blast off, and we can get into the eyes and ears of more people. Because then, iTunes has these algorithms that just propel it up the charts, in the food category, and we just climb in the rankings. Some of the freaking episodes of other podcasts, they're defunct. They're like, the last time I did it was 2015. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And they're being ranked at iTunes, so we got to knock those guys out, and we got to get in there. So without further ado, let's get to Chet. Hey, we're here with Chet Brett. He is the brand manager of Tribes Beer Company in Mokina, Illinois. How you doing, Chet?
Super duper, thanks.
That's awesome. So, yeah, we got connected by, Mike here, who comes into the tap room, and he suggested that I would give you a call. But you have a lot of experience in the beer industry, yeah.
Mike's one of my heroes. He is a Marine and he's worked in the government for years, and he's a high school chum and a craft beer enthusiast of some accomplishment too.
Oh yeah, he's awesome. He wants to volunteer all the time. Come in, whenever he needs help. Come in and help brew. And I'm like, yeah, I'll take you up on that. Don't worry.
That's one of the fundamental things that help us get started when we have our friends come along and help bottle, help this, help that. It's amazing what a couple of beers can get you in free help, I'll tell you.
We like the barter system, yes. We like the barter system here. So we, in the beginning especially, just to get people help build out, and, it's tremendous.
And it gives the people, a sense of ownership, or make it more of a club, an environment where people feel that they're a part of something makes a real good customer base.
Well, that's the whole thing we're trying to push, the community, bring people in, and, this is something that we made together, use local ingredients, which is what we do. We use some local honey, local maple syrup. People can come in and say, yeah, I helped build this place, and, it's cool. So I just wanted to get, maybe pass it over to you. I just wanted to get your story. Like, how'd you get started in the beer industry? You told me your grandfather used to work at Schaefer Beer.
Yeah, Schaefer Beer back in New York. So he had, he was a grandfather age, so he had been in the industry for quite a long time by the time I was born into the family. But yeah, so he had the big accounts. He was at the first Ali Fraser Fried at Madison Square Garden, and he was quite the New York character along the way. So I was exposed to it as an early age. Drinking age was 18 back in when we were growing up. So started drinking beer early on, and then a lot happened along the way. I moved around a little bit here and there, and then I moved out to Chicagoland 6 years ago. I was looking for a job, and the craft industry was really in this one of the mainly growth spirit portions of it. And I jumped on board at a brewery called Church Street Brewing, and I was there for 5.5, 6 years, which I love. Great family and great organization, great beers, great lagers. And then I got a new opportunity at Tribes down in Mokina, where our owner Niall had started a bar down in that area, I think about maybe 14 years ago, give or take, called Galway Tribes. And that morphed into another Tribes, and then we had the Tribes Ale House, and then we just about 5-6 months ago, opened the Tribes Beer Company production brewery, tap room, and beer garden in downtown Macrino, right at the train station. So our head brewer, Matt Volker, has been a friend of mine for years in the industry, and then he came over from Revolution about a year ago to help build out the production brewery. So he's worked with Will Turner and Jim Seebeck, some of the legendary brewers of the United States. So we've got a pretty good pedigree through it. So I'm pretty excited to have the opportunity to get some more beer into the Chicagoland market.
Yeah, I'm looking at your the website here, and I'm looking at the history, and you started with an ale house, and then another ale house, and then he says, yeah, well, why don't we just brew our own beer? And they bought a system, and what's the size of the system now?
So we have 15-barrel brew house, 30-barrel fermenters. It's a nice little setup. And so what we had been going off just a brew pub for years, and then we would be part of our Windy City is our distributor out here in Chicagoland, and we would do their expo, and people would love the beer so much, and they're like, oh, well, we can't produce enough out of the brew pub, so we now made the investment and the commitment and the bet that we're going to make something happen. So pretty excited. We just got our cans into the market, so I'm out doing tastings at the local binnies and the local bottle shops like Beer Cellar, and trying to tell the story, hand selling it one six at a time. So it's pretty fun.
Wow, that's cool. Like the growth, I see the growth of it. Now you're the brand manager. What do you actually do there as a brand manager?
Well, in breweries, there's sometimes you're asked to do a lot of things. I try to stay away from the actual brewing side because we got pretty good guys at it. But I'm out there selling day in and day out and telling the story about the brewery. I'm doing, radio and promotional things. I'm doing beer festivals, and I'm out there sampling at the local supermarkets and local liquor stores. So it's pretty much anything to help tell the story about the brewery. And craft beer in a bigger sense, because, a lot of times you'll do a sampling at a liquor store, and people who aren't necessarily that exposed to craft beer. Obviously, at our breweries, we see all the beer geeks come in, and all the people are super enthusiastic. Sometimes you'll be in a local Jewel or Burkott's or one of these supermarkets, and people who aren't really exposed to craft beer say, oh, what is this? And then you give them, for example, for us, we have this Daylight Kolsch, which is a very easy drinking beer. And sometimes people are just confused. They think all beer has to be that, bitter, hoppy IPAs, which, of course, I like and enjoy, but not necessarily the Main Street consumers not as exposed to it as our craft beer friends are.
Yeah, and I think that's the goal of our podcast, is to educate people that there's just, there's so many different other styles of beer rather than just lagers and lighter beers. We do these on Monday where we interview somebody, and then on Wednesday, actually, I do like a beer styles podcast where I take a different style from each category in the GABF guidelines.
Sure. Wow.
And then I just do that, and I just go through, how the style of beer is, dark, what kind of glass to serve it in, examples. And then on Fridays we do craft beer news. But just that's our goal, is just to try to educate people that there is more than
even some of the rudimentary things about the beer. Sometimes people see a darker beer and they have all these preconceived ideas of what it's going to be like, and once they start sipping it, they realize no, they don't have to be as intimidating as they thought.
Right, they see dark beer, they run away. Especially going to bars and restaurants. Like we had a beer that was a little darker, it was like a little red. And then, the sales guy went in, and they're like, oh, it's red, it's dark. I'm like, yeah, it's good, though. Try it. So that people still have the idea that all beer has to be kind of lighter colored. But it's just educating people on it, which is what you're doing as well.
Oh, we're getting there, too, because places like, we get fortunate. We've got great relationships with the real legendary craft beer bars in Chicago, and Matt Broom and Maria's Package and spots like that. But we're also getting into the Whole Foods out in the suburbs and the Whole Foods in the city, and they're not afraid to experiment with getting in some big beers. We have a beer called 0 to 100, which is our Imperial IPA, and it comes in with an ABV around 10%.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
You wouldn't necessarily think, people going shopping, they're going to be drinking 10% IPAs, but fortunately for us, they are, and enjoying it. And that's one of the many fun things about what we're doing. That's
great. I mean, I saw your beer list, and you have just a wide variety of beers, Belgian style, you have darker beer stouts, and your IPAs, Imperial IPAs, yeah.
And that's one of the challenges. You make so many beers, and everybody will, I want that one up at my spot. I want that one up at my spot. And what we can do at the brewery is a lot easier than trying to get all those different styles through our distributor up through the chain. But, if we get some feedback on it, we love to try to bring it out as much as we can.
Right. You just got to see what people like, and make more of it and see if you can get it out, especially working with distributors, too. I mean, they want, volume. They have to make money.
And that's why I'm exposed to it on the front lines, and I understand that these distributors, reps, they got portfolios of some of the greatest beers in the country are inside of Windy City's distribution portfolio, and we're proud to be a part of it. So we have to have the mind share of the rep when he's on the front lines executing the sales, and that's what I try to do, give a little bit of help and, tell the story a little bit so that the buyers are ready to buy it.
Right, and you have the experience in the industry as well. You know how to handle these guys.
I always say there's some guys that, it's almost like they think you got to kiss the ring, and sometimes that can be a little much, and you kind of try to reel them in and say, well, no, that's not how it goes. There's a certain amount of, hey, we're all in this together. So if you don't want to be part of it, that's okay. We've got a lot of other places that want it. Right.
Yeah. So, I was looking at also the website. Now, do you serve food in your establishments or just snacks?
So we have 3 places. The easiest one, so we have the Tribes Ale House, which is a traditional great ale house, some of the greatest lineup of craft you'll see anywhere in the Chicagoland area. It's kind of got a nice reputation for that by itself. And then we have food there, but then we also have the Brew Pub, which is on Route 30 in Mokina. And we have a full pub menu there, and the people love the food. It's great that they have that. And then, of course, the production brewery, which we just opened, is does no food, just a tap room and a nice beer garden. So,
right, looks nice. And then you want to put a Tribes Beer Company on Mars, I see, on 3018.
We'll get there. I mean, with the camera, I don't know if you saw the video the other day, but that's a pretty good camera.
That's a noble quest. And you know what? 3018, I think it's possible. 1,000 years from now, you're fine.
Yeah.
But you never know. But, hey, so... now, do you use local ingredients in your beer at all, or?
Yeah, and so as part of the whole process, we all want to do the best we can, both to be green and to support our local communities. One of the new or growing hop producers is Hophead Farms out of Michigan. Our friend Nunzio Pizza and his crew do a great job bringing some local hops to the market. We're fortunate to get some of that. We have Omega Yeast, which is a local yeast company that we get some yeast from.
Right.
And the grains, and it's and we're very proud of having Great Lake Michigan water. Lake Michigan, the Great Lakes has some great profile. You have to take out the city, with charcoal filters and that, but you basically to take out the chlorine and not the fluoride and whatnot. But it's great beer to brew with, so we're pretty excited about that.
Right, and you're right. I mean, you have a huge source of water there, really good water.
Yeah, there's a lot of fresh water there, and it's anyway, it's great water to brew with.
That's awesome. Yeah, and what do you see the challenges in the craft beer business today? What do you see? Like, what have you guys experienced, and what do you see other brewers in the in the Chicago area and Illinois in general?
Well, I've been fortunate just in the last 6 years to have been have met and seen the growth of a lot of different versions of what people thought they were going to start out with when they originally started out with the idea that they were going to have their own brewery. Some, because of the competition, realized that maybe it's not such a big idea to try to get my cans out there. Maybe I should just make it a destination brewery where people come in and I really focus on their experience being inside of the brewery, because it's competitive out there. There's, I don't know how many there were 6 years ago when I started out in Chicagoland, but there's well over 220, 230 breweries in the state of Illinois. And fortunately, a lot of our retail partners do a great job of supporting a lot of us, but the consumer is not necessarily growing at the same rate as we are. And there's a bit of cannibalizing each other's growth. And you see that where, big regional breweries or big national breweries that have had a big share in Chicagoland have maybe seen their market share fall off a little bit as our local Illinois breweries have grown. Right.
And I see that's a lot of breweries in the state. I mean, do you know what the population is in the state, or?
I probably should, but you take a state like California. What do they have? 800 or some ridiculous sum like that, and there's room. The Brewers Association, which is our national organization that helps with legislation and education and helping tell the story of breweries. Our friend Bart Watson is the staff economist, and there was a time they were shooting to get to 20% by the year 2020. But certain challenges with the bigger guys being taken over by some of the multinational breweries, they lose their quote-unquote craft brew status, and they can't be included. And I think the guidelines are 25%, or it has to be less than 25% of the ownership of the brewery is by a non-designation craft brewery. So if you have over, 6 million barrels a year or some number like that, and because, for example, Lagunitas is owned by Heineken, and in the official understanding, they're not necessarily quote-unquote craft brewery, but to us in the craft brewery industry, we're all partners and we're all trying to do the same thing, and they're great partners with us, and for us with Goose Island in Chicagoland, they're just a great big brother. They're a lot of best practices on safety and being green are all stuff that they pass on through our Illinois Craft Brewers Guild to help make an industry stronger.
Goose Island. I just interviewed the brewer from Goose Island in Shanghai in China. A couple of weeks ago. I got connected with him, and he came onto the podcast. So it was like 7 a.m. here, and I was drinking my coffee, and it was 7 p.m. there, and he was drinking a beer. So we're like,
and I got to tell you, for our friends who obviously have been exposed to Goose Island and what they've done with their Bourbon County Stout. If you want to pick up a good holiday book, I'll give a plug to our friend Josh Noel from the Chicago Tribune. He wrote this book, Barrel Aged Stout and Selling Out, Goose Island, Anheuser-Busch, and now crafted became one big business. And it's all about the history of craft beer in Goose Island in Chicagoland in the last 25, 30 years that John Hall and Greg Hall put, craft beer, on the scene in a big way from the local standpoint in Chicagoland. We're great friends with a lot of the people over there. And again, they've done a lot for our guild and our brewers. And obviously the legacy of those organizations like that have spawned great brewers that have gone on to open up their own places. So.
Right. I know another brewer that did work for Goose Island, Mexico, and he came back to New Hampshire here, and he worked at a brewery up here in New Hampshire, Bad Lab, and now he's at Trillium in Massachusetts. So I'm trying to get a hold of him again, but he has a lot of knowledge, and his beer is really good. Like I went in, I'm like, wow, this stuff is really good. So he knows what he was talking about. So it's great that the larger breweries are also helping the craft beer guild, and also the brewers, trying to help them out instead of like a us versus them thing, because we're all kind of in the same boat here in terms of beer,
Yeah, and as long as the business practices aren't taken advantage of, we're all trying to do the same thing.
Right.
And again, this is years ago when it was even more so, but when people were intimidated by Blue Moon, well, the thing about Blue Moon is that introduced a lot of beer drinkers to a style of beer that wasn't typically a beer that they had been exposed to. And now that's given a lot of local brewers an opportunity to make a beer that's similar in style to that, obviously. But it's a local version of it. So that's been kind of fun, too.
You're right. I had another guest on that, said exactly the same thing about Blue Moon. It's a Belgian, like a white ale. And it did expose everybody to that type of style, which is like, all right, well, other breweries make it, and let me try this and that. And yeah.
And I've tasted quite a few people over the last 6 years, as you can imagine, in my job, and it's been a lot of fun. And I'll meet a whole spectrum. I'll have people that'll drink a IPA and hate it, and they'll be like, oh, boom, boom. And then I'll get somebody who'll sip it once, and they'll find something interesting, and they'll sip it a second and third time. And that's usually where you're going to really decide if you love an IPA or not. And when they do, you find out, yeah, you know what? It's not as intimidating. There's sometimes a gateway IPA that can get somebody to start liking their IPA. And I've had people go, I used to hate IPAs. Now that's all I drink. So I just encourage people not to be intimidated, to go to their local brewery, brew pub, introduce yourself, start sampling some beers, and go explore.
That's what we're trying to do, get people to come into local breweries and try what they have, because it's fresh, it's local. That's another reason why I started the podcast, because I see a lot of I see like 90% of the stores and bars and restaurants have this big beer on tap and mass-produced beer. And a lot of people are just unaware that there's just so many different, breweries in their area and other types of styles of beer that they can take advantage of, and they might find their new favorite beer.
Yeah, and another way to do that too is to go to some of the beer festivals that are all around the area. I mean, I know in Illinois there's sometimes 2, 3, 4 a weekend, and it's each neighborhood, each town seems to be throwing one, and people take part of the community. It's a lot of fun.
Well, beer festivals are great. Yeah, you can have like some kind of charitable aspect to it too, and raise some money for local charities, and also expose people to breweries that they wouldn't have known of. They're like, where are you? Where are you located? Like we're at festivals and like, oh yeah, we're in Portsmouth. They're like, where? Right. Oh, I live right up the street from there. I'm like, that's great. Thanks. But and they didn't know we were here, but now they know. So the festivals are great to promote local craft brew as well. And what do you see? I think there's a big shift also, like in terms of I think it's like a hyper local shift to people drinking really local beer. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of the larger breweries closing, like Green Flash. Makes excellent beer. I'm not even sure they're making beer anymore, but they made excellent beer, and they were out all over the place, and then they scaled back, and then they had a new facility in Virginia Beach, and then that was closed. They didn't even open it. I guess they just built it, and then I think New Realm took it over. That's there in Atlanta. But what do you think about the hyperlocal?
And that's where it gets into. There's a certain business part of craft beer that, as we grow, there's those challenges and trying to understand, is this really the best way? I know Lagunitas has had great success opening up the brewery, the production brewery and tap room in Chicagoland, because it's easier to, ship it from Chicago than it is to ship it all the way from Petaluma. So they've had great success with that. But at the same time, I think Stone and some of the other people that were working on big plans on the East Coast maybe just slowed those down a little bit to just try to understand, where everybody's going to stand on this without committing the next level of investment.
That's right. I mean, a lot of breweries just went nuts, and they opened different locations, and they got caught. They got caught. And it's just a huge capital investment too, to for beer and building out a place. And, I was looking at different locations and maybe in New York, and I went into Brooklyn and I was looking at the location and maybe, it's, the $150 a square foot and the 4,000 square feet. All right, now I got to come up with like $600,000.
Sure.
To just build a place out. That's not even the equipment, right? Like that's a huge cost. I don't know for an individual. I don't know about a company, but and still, you got to get people in there, and so it's a challenging industry.
That is for sure.
You said that you, and also that you lobbied with the Brewers Association for laws in the U.S.
Well,
and also
I've been fortunate. So in Illinois, we have a really strong guild, the Illinois Craft Brewers Guild, and we do stuff legislatively down in Springfield, and it's an important part because breweries represent so many different parts of communities. Their agriculture, their manufacturing, their tourism. And it's just great. So then at the national level, that tax bill that went through last year, part of it was legislation about the Brewers Act. I forget what the actual, because we originally had for the smaller breweries, the Small Brewers Act, and then the legislators wanted us to get together with our big beer brothers to come up with some way to make everybody happy, and that's always going to be a certain challenge. But that brought our federal excise tax down from $7 a barrel down to $3.50 a barrel. And you're the accountant part of the equation. That number can add up and be an extra fermenter, another employee. And then when those things get scored out, you see that it is a good idea to give us a break because that money is going to find its way back into the community. So I was fortunate 3 years in a row to have gone out to Washington and met with our legislators, and it's funny to see. We have great relationships with the legislators in Illinois in terms of craft beer and that, whereas not necessarily every state gets done with a day of going around lobbying and having the same kind of success. As some states are just a little bit not as open-minded or as clear thinking, or for whatever reasons they have other motivations not to be as on board as we are. But it's pretty fun. It's great to see the whole process of government up front and a real specific thing. So it was quite a kick. You go from office to office and either meet with a representative or a senator and kind of tell them the story. And then, in some cases they're big on board craft enthusiasts, and some are like, it's an industry in my district and I want to support you guys, and what else can we do to help out? So it's a lot of fun.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I love to do that as well. Try to get involved in that, and do you have an active guild in New Hampshire? Yeah, we do. We have the New Hampshire Brewer Association, which is in New Hampshire. But there's still a lot of antiquated laws. I mean, New Hampshire's getting better, but there's still a lot of perky laws that are just they don't make sense. Like in terms of. I think they passed a bill recently that because I have a tap room, but in order to serve pints, I have to serve some food, right? But I really don't know anything about food, and so they tried to change the law, and they passed a new law that says, all right, the food requirement is waived, but not for the smaller guy, only for the manufacturing brew pubs. I'm like, oh, come on. It's like the bigger guys get a break, but the smaller guys really needed the break, so. Well,
and that's why it's real important to have an active guild and association to make sure that, our voices are being heard, because, we talk about the 3-tier system, and in the middle tier, the distribution tier, that they're very strong advocates, and they've been lobbying a lot longer than, a lot of us young, breweries that have only been around for a couple of years, they're handling so many different things. The idea of lobbying and doing that is a little foreign to them. So now all of a sudden you got to take these brewers with these tattoos and long beards and clean them up for a day or two and bring them in front of legislators and do your dog and pony show. And there's a pretty fun picture of the whole group in front of this the Capitol down in Washington, D.C., and it's kind of fun to see all these guys cleaned up with the beards trimmed up and the tattoos covered by sport coats and suits.
Boy, I got to take a picture of that. That was fun. But, I think there are, the state by state, there's laws, and I had somebody else on the podcast. He's trying to connect brewers directly with consumers. Because you can do this at wine. Like wine, you could ship wherever you want, but beer is a different story. I mean, there's only, from what I understand, I think there's only 7 or 9 states that allow beer that's from another state to be shipped in. And each state has its own license. Like if you want to do business in that state or ship it to that state, you have to buy a license from that state. So it's kind of there's 50 versions of it. Some states get it and some states just seem to not get it. And it makes it more of a challenge and whatnot. And that's why when you were putting together a brewery, you need a team of people. What you're good at, what somebody else is good at, what the brewer's good at doesn't necessarily all line up. But as long as the brewer knows his way around, a brew house, that's a really important part of that equation. And then, you have somebody minding the P's and Q's and dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And then you have hopefully somebody like me out there helping tell the story and sampling out the beer and go. You do. It's a business. It's a business. I mean, beer is cool, and you make it, and we all drink it. It's great and tastes great, but it's a business. And if you don't look at the business aspect, and
if you look at business like you're moving a product, the product's a widget. We have a very heavy widget. For the amount of space and weight that a keg takes up, you could produce a lot of smaller little widgets that sell for a lot more than what we were able to sell our beer for. And make a lot more money, but it's a passion, fortunately for us, and that makes up for a lot.
Well, that's what I say. It's a passion. I mean, it's the margins in this business are not really that big unless you can get people to come into your tap room, like big crowds of people. Then you're doing okay. But there is an element of distribution, and also like cans. I used to do cans, but I'm so small that I can't. I used to do the 22-ounce bottles, and it was awesome. We had a distributor, and he got them out there. Then they got bought out by another distributor, and things didn't go too well. So now we're self-distributing, and then we started getting into cans because that's what everybody wants. They don't want bottles anymore. And I can't make any money on these cans because I'm not big enough. And so I'm just trying to go the keg route now, trying to get kegs out there as a supplemental income to the tap room.
Sure.
Yeah. To try to brew beer and get it out. But still, those kegs are heavy, like you said,
Yeah, well, and in the Northeast and out in the Midwest, those if you're self-distributing, you got those slippery stairs going in the back of a restaurant or bar in the crowded city of Chicago, dropping off those kegs. You're kind of like,
it's a hazard.
It is a hazard. And
you fall back and have that thing fall on you, you're done.
And fortunately for us at our size, we have a great relationship with our distributor, and they've got these front end guys. And every time I see them, I always thank them because I know that being on the front line delivering these heavy kegs in all types of weather can be a real challenge.
Oh, yeah, they earn their pay. Yeah, the guys that picked up, we did kegs too with the distributor, and what they did and moved them around, and I mean, they earn their pay. They work hard, these guys, they work very hard. But, yeah, so that's what we're doing now. We're self-distributing. But so what do you think people keep talking about? I mean, you see the explosion of breweries, and they're just growing like exponentially, it seems. There's a new brewery growing every day. Do you think it's kind of a craft beer bubble that we are in, or what do you think about that?
Well, the thing is, how you answer that question could put a bullseye on you to say, oh, you were the guy that was a naysayer. The reality is it's a small business, and there's certain challenges to any small business that are going to put strains on growth. Partners break up, relationships break up like anything else. And so that can be a little bit to it because now all of a sudden, instead of, 2,000 breweries, there's 6,000 breweries. So if there's only a certain percentage of that happening, say it's 5% times 6 is a lot higher than 5% times 2. So those are the kind of things that, people will seize on. I think if you make a quality beer and you have a pretty solid business plan and keep it humble, but you have to understand what your audience is going to be, and it might not be. I was saying before, I've dealt with a lot of breweries over the last 6 years that have gone from, ideas in guys' heads to actually executing it, and the delay in them getting the process going, in some regards, was one of the things that helped them, because what they thought they were going to do 5 years ago and what they did a year ago were two different things, and they're in a more adaptable situation now. And I think the idea of having a place where people are going to come drink your beer is always going to be a solid idea. It's, the whole idea of a public house, to get people together in a room, in an environment, talk, enjoy, socialize. Our friends at Elmhurst Brewing in Elmhurst, Illinois, they're so much a part of the community. The baseball teams are coming in after their practices, and, the couples that own it are family families from that area. So they get a nice environment, and it's just great to see.
Yeah, that's great about the community brewery, and that's why I think everything's trending hyper local as well. Because you're going to have a brewery, and that's the way it was before, pre-prohibition. There were a load of breweries. I mean, and the population was a fraction of what it was today. So if you take that and extrapolate it, we're probably doing okay. We're not really even reaching the peak. And then you look at wineries, too. I think there's like 12,000 wineries or 14,000.
Yeah, some big number like that.
The breweries, there's only like 7,000 or 8,000 right now. So we still have some room to grow. But there are, and I see it every day, there's local breweries that are just, they open up, like one brewery opened up after we did, and they just closed. They couldn't do it. It was just too much, the cash flow, and, they tried to get into the canning, and then they got a distributor, and it just didn't work out.
But like you see, excuse me, as you're self-distributing and getting kegs out, that cooperage is expensive to own, unless you go to pay-per-view, and that's a whole nother thing. And so if you're going to have, there's, I think, a multiple of 5 or 6 per account that you have to count for the kegs that are out once you sell them and haven't gone back to fill it up to sell it again. Right. And that's a whole, then again, it gets into some of the, the math part of the brewery business, which is, as we say, can be pretty daunting.
It's the capital. You have to buy kegs. And if you start leasing, like we used to lease kegs too, and that was a disaster. That didn't work out too well. When we had a distributor and they were cranking it out and we got kegs out there, it was fine. But then when that stopped, they're like, oh, geez, we still had the lease payment, and that wasn't good. So we got out of that. But now I used to do quarter barrel kegs, so we got all those back to the leasing company, thank goodness. And now we're just focusing in on buying. I'm just buying like sixtels now, 6 barrel, sixth of a barrel. It's a sixtel, like a bullet or a log.
For the layman, it's about
gallons.
40. It's like 40 pints.
Yeah. So, yeah, that it's an interesting industry. I mean, when I started, it was like a 22-ounce bottle. So yeah, I could do this. It's fine. And then it just changed, and that's only 4 years. And when I started, it was only 20 breweries in New Hampshire, and now there's over 90. In 4 years, it's like exploded. Yeah.
See, I think that number's probably a higher percentage than even Illinois would be with our 220 some odd, because I know we're a lot more than twice as big. Can't imagine how many people are even in the state of New Hampshire.
There's not many. I think there's like 8 million, I think, in the state.
So that
not
many?
Even that. I think there's 4 million. Excuse me, 4 million.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the population of your state, and our state is like 98 breweries. So yikes. So yeah. I don't know. I mean, there is a lot of competition, and I see it. There is a lot of competition. We all try to help each other out, but still, I mean, if there's a tap line that's free, I want my beer on that tap line. Sorry. Sorry, you're a nice guy, but I want my beer on that tap line. So and when you work inside of a distributor network, you have to understand that, a certain percentage of those lines might be quote unquote controlled by your distributor, meaning, oh yeah,
the buyer just wants to say, all right, well, we have 20 lines, we have 4 major distributors. Everybody's going to get 5. You can decide which one of those 5 you want. It's not necessarily anything legal. It's just business practice. Like, hey, I like everybody. The distributor from this guy's good. All right, well, which 5 do you want? And you got to say, hey, we got to make a difference inside of that brewery without, cannibalizing that. So you say, oh, let's take one of the other handles from the other, the other distributor and try to get it that way. But it's always a struggle. It
is a struggle, and some places I go into, and they're like, "I'm sorry, we don't deal with self-distributing breweries." I'm like, "That's ridiculous." Like we're right up the street from you, and you won't put our beer on because there's things going on behind the scenes.
Oh, and
it's just
sometimes
blatant.
If you're close, they look at it as competition as opposed to saying this, and that's a little bit surprising. There's some arguments I would say to that not being the case, but. People have preconceived ideas. You don't necessarily have to convince everybody. You're like, okay, well, I'll move on from you.
No, I've heard it a number of times, and it just pisses me off. That's another reason why I started this podcast. I don't want to expose people, but maybe I should.
Well, you'd probably get some good ink on your podcast if you start dropping names. I guess you probably followed a lot closer than I did. That story out of Boston a couple of years ago with the distributor.
Oh, that was a disaster, man. They almost put that distributorship out of business. I think they settled for like $25 million or something like that, some ridiculous amount. But they were fining them like something like $100 million or something like that, and because I guess the brewer just came out and said, yeah, our distributor pays for tap lines, and it's okay. And then the liquor commission's like, what?
Yeah, that's about as verboten a thing you can do. That's for sure.
I guess, yes, but I don't know. It's just But we want to try to get more people into the tap room anyway, and try to avoid that. But it's a struggle, and it's a business. You have to keep income coming in, so that's an element of your income.
And to that end, you start saying, okay, well, what are we going to do? We're just going to we'll have a karaoke night, or we'll have a trivia night, or we're going to have live music. We're going to do this and that, and it's a scramble to help figure out how you're going to market it. On top of the fact that you're making great beer, on top of all the other factors. So,
yeah, marketing too. I mean, it's how do you market it? And marketing is a cost. If you do traditional marketing, it's ridiculous. Like if you put something in a newspaper, like a little square box, it's like $400 or something like that just to do that. I mean,
that's a lot of pints.
That's a lot of pints, So now we've been resorting to Facebook and trying to target, local people, and we're just trying to figure it out too. It's just an evolving process, man. You figure it out, and things are going well, and then trends change. Like from the bottles to the cans, and then
that was a big one.
That was a big one, and it put a lot of breweries out of business, because they were focusing in on bottles, and then people were like, and it's just a ridiculous thing. I mean, the beer's the same; it's just the container, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you think that's illogical? Like it doesn't make sense, but it is reality. So you either have to adapt or die, and you have to pivot. If you're too big and you invest like a huge amount in this infrastructure, and you're doing things a certain way, and then the industry suddenly changes, you're screwed.
Absolutely.
You are screwed because you owe the bank a lot of money. So, but
that's why we got to encourage people to come out and visit us at our breweries and buy our beer when they see it available at the stores, and tell their friends and bring their friends, and have 40th birthday parties, and have 21st birthday parties, and have 70th birthday parties, and have rehearsal parties there, and all the events. Make it part. Make it part of yours.
Exactly, and it's increasing in our tap room. It's awesome. I'm getting a lot of emails in from my son's going to be 28. I want to have a party for I want to buy 90 pints. I'm like, all right, awesome, come on in. And I need you to get a bus for me to chaperone everybody. All right, cool, let's do it. So I'll call the bus guy, try to organize that. But we need more stuff like that, to get people in and just expose people to where we are, and then they know where we are, right? So then they can come back with other friends or. So it's a good thing. So yeah, and I ask everybody this, and they say it's not a fair question. Is there any favorite? What's your favorite beer?
Well, a lot of people tell you what the next one, or the one in my hand, as we like to say. I like my IPAs. It seems funny to say to a guy in New England, but out here in Chicago, we've gone after the New England IPAs pretty aggressively out here. So I enjoy those style. But, along the way, you just get exposed to different styles and you start finding you're not as closed-minded. I wasn't necessarily, I'm still not a big sour guy myself, but if all of a sudden somebody gives you a beer and you all of a sudden it's sour, you're like, dang, I guess I don't hate sours anymore. That was a good one. And it's a way to experience what other guys' challenges are. And, hey, how did you come up with that? And, we have our big beer festival in the fall, right before Thanksgiving, FOBAB, Festival of Barrel-Aged Beers. When it's, they get these barrel-aged beers of all different styles sitting in these, barrels for weeks, months, some cases years, and they got that whole profile that you pick up from that. And then there's the whole subcategory of, sour beers and fruit beers that are put in, and you come up with a whole different flavor profile, and, you get people into it, and people become so into it, they keep chasing that stuff down. That's why getting back to Goose Island with their coming out with Bourbon County Stout,
right,
typically the Friday after Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and they still, years later, still get lines around the block and then some. Overnight parties have popped up around Chicagoland over the years supporting it. And then it then becomes a little bit bigger than just the beer. It becomes more of an event-oriented thing, which is important. People like to have reasons to celebrate and to do crazy things. And I've often said over the last few years how much I think breweries and craft beer have taken a place a little bit of golf. I think to get together on a Saturday afternoon to go to a local brewery is pretty easy doing. Some cases to play around a golf, it becomes a big hubbub. But fortunately, just stop by the brewery, say hello to some friends, and enjoy yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great thing. There's tons of different styles and sour beer. You got to know what you're doing when you make sour beers too. I've tasted sour beers like vinegar. I'm like, this is not good.
And again, before we have our Festival of Barrel-Aged Beer festivals, we have seminars, and there'll be people sharing their best practices and telling people how they did this and doing that, and it's just great to see everybody sharing the knowledge. It's wonderful.
Well, that's great, and that's what's good about the industry and brewers. They're willing to share their knowledge, and there's no secret. There are certain secrets, but most of it, they're willing to help other brewers, so that just produces better beer, which is great, And that New England IPA and GABF, like there wasn't, all the ones that won it were non-New England breweries. I don't know what the hell happened there.
Gary and his team over at Alarmist out of Chicago won the biggest category this year for the IPAs.
Oh, right, yeah.
Lejeune. And last year, Brandon Banbury from Hailstorm, they had Prairie Madness, and for breweries, we're pretty proud of being able to make the whole spectrum of styles out here in Chicagoland.
That's awesome, yeah. And there's a lot of breweries concentrated in your area. I'm looking at a map. It's just a huge amount of breweries. I got to come out there and just hang out.
Yeah, come on out. We'll spend a couple of weeks trying to hit a couple of them.
That's right. And get some steak. Oh my God, the steak out there is fantastic.
It's a great area out here in the Midwest.
Man.
We're having a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, so Chet, I appreciate you being on the podcast. You have a lot of knowledge and a lot of interesting insight on beer, and I wish you well in Tribes Beer Company. I got to get out there.
I appreciate that. Yeah, maybe next summer when I head back east, I'll be able to zip up to see you and Mike up in New Hampshire. And,
come up to New Hampshire, absolutely.
And have a couple of beers and see how the New Englands do the New England IPAs.
That's right. We got good beer here, yeah, good beer. But
and I would tell the people, I'd remind the people not to be intimidated. Stop by, obviously, to see us at Tribes, you guys up at Beara, and your local spot. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably only within probably 15 minutes of finding a brewery right by you. So go by, say hello, ask them some questions, and have some fun, because that's really what it's all about.
That's right, exactly. So... All right, Chet. Well, I appreciate you being on the podcast, and I wish you well, and I hope I got to get out there and see you guys soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that was Chet Brett, the brand manager at Tribes Beer Company in Illinois. A lot of great information from him. He's done a lot in the beer industry, with lobbying with the Brewers Association, going to Washington, visiting senators and representatives trying to get some beer laws changed, especially with the taxes, that they charge. I mean, it just frees up a lot of cash for breweries to do other stuff with that money, which is cool. And if you like this podcast, if you like what we're doing, please go onto iTunes. Please give us a rating, give us a review, subscribe. That's the only way we get up there. We get up in the rankings, and that just focuses attention on what we're trying to do, is to promote local craft brew. There's a lot of craft breweries that are local. These guys work hard. They got families. We want to try to drive people to their locations, go into bars, and they can get a pint of their beer, go into stores, buy their 6-pack or 4-pack, and just help these guys out, because there is an alternative to mass-produced watered-down beer, and that's delicious local craft beer. So, guys, that's our show for today. Tune in on Wednesdays for beer styles, where I take a different style from each category and the GABF guidelines, and we just expand on it. We talk about the grains, and we talk about glasses that you would use to pour the beer into and enjoy the beer. We talk about examples of the style. So it's just a lot of different styles, and much more than just lagers and pilsners, lighter beers. A lot of different delicious beer out there, and you got to get educated on that. So we do that on Wednesday. And then Friday, we have craft beer news. So you can come back on Friday, and if you subscribe, you'll get it right on your phone, where we talk about the past week's beer news. Usually I have a guest on too and get their perspective. Join us, join the storm, and let's do it. Let's get that craft beer knowledge out there. Okay, guys, until next time, take care.